Welcome to My Business Matters, the Michigan Chamber podcast.
Hello, welcome. I'm Jim Holcomb, President and CEO of the Michigan Chamber, and today's podcast host. Today we're going to take a closer look at a policy issue that's been plaguing the Great Lakes state for decades, and no stranger to this podcast as well, as we've talked about this issue before, and it's our roads. Chronic underfunding in road maintenance and rebuilding has led Michigan to have, unfortunately, some of the worst transportation infrastructure in the country, a distinction we certainly don't like and one we need to fix. And so what can we do to pave the way for change, effective, meaningful, and sustainable solutions? That's our goal as we look forward to working with the legislature and the governor on this. Here to help us break it all down, Lance Binoniemi. He's the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Michigan Transportation and Infrastructure Association. Ed Noyola, the Chief Deputy and Legislative Director of the County Roads Association, and the Michigan Chamber's very own Mike Alaimo. He's our Senior Director of Legislative and External Affairs. Gentlemen, thanks for joining.
Thanks.
Hello.
Thank you.
Certainly a topic we're getting tired of talking about, one that never goes away and one we never seem to fix. So in the next few minutes we have together, I'm going to rely on you guys to clarify it all for our listeners and make sure you have a solution and something we can get done. So hopefully you got that.
No problem.
No problem. Yep.
I think a good way to start, though, is a little bit of level setting, because I want to make sure people know about Lance and Ed, your groups, and what you guys do. So, Ed, we'll start with you. You're immediately to my left here. A little bit about the group and your activity.
We are a full-service association. We have all 83 county road commissions and departments. I say departments because we do have 7 departments that were taken over. The road commission was taken over by the county government itself. So we do have that. We have 90,000 miles of road, which is about 75% of the total straight miles in the state of Michigan. We have 5,800 plus bridges that we're responsible. That's about 51% of all the bridges in the state of Michigan.
I think that's an interesting point. Just before we go to Lance, for listeners to understand that there are different road systems, can you kind of give a little highlight of just generally how that breaks down?
Right now, it breaks down there. We have 90,000 miles. The cities, municipalities, they have 20,000 miles, and the Department of Transportation has about 10,000 straight lane miles, not lane miles, but straight miles.
And federal, like I-94, something falls under the state.
Everything that the department has is federal aid eligible. Okay. All of their system. About a third of our system is federal aid eligible, and I would probably say that or a little bit less for the municipalities. I hate speaking for them, but that's my guess.
Okay. Lance MITA, how about you?
Yeah, so the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association, or MITA, was formed in 2007 after the merger of the Michigan Road Builders Association and the Associated Underground Contractors. And so MITA represents about 600 companies that build our roads, bridges, underground water and sewers, utilities, dams, all types of infrastructure in every corner of the state.
Yep. So your members are really impacting every community, corner to corner, in every county.
We are. Every no job's too big, no job's too small.
Yep. And Mike, how about the Michigan Chamber? How does road funding or infrastructure fit into our members' kind of legislative priorities or their opinions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it falls into 2 kind of lanes. One, we want to have good infrastructure to support our business community, our communities writ large. We want it to be we want Michigan to be a place where people want to live, work, and play, and so you have to have good infrastructure to do that. And then, of course, secondly, properly funding our roads for everyday commuters, for our freight and traffic, and small businesses with light and mid-duty fleets. Right, you need good roads and infrastructure in order to support those critical supply chains.
Yeah. Lance, I know you've always taken kind of a lead as we work with you in coalitions with all of us together. Looking at some of the dollars, and there's a lot of numbers get thrown around. And we've talked about chronic underfunding. This is an issue that's plagued our state forever. What do you really think the number is right now that we need?
Sure. Yeah, and there are a lot of different numbers that are thrown around, and it's because, as we mentioned earlier, there are different road systems. There are different ways we measure our roads and rate our roads. Unfortunately, we don't have all of our roads rated, but we have a good chunk of those. And the last serious study that was done in 2023, and it suggested that we need $3.9 billion more annually into our road transportation network.
Which we know has already gone up because of inflation and cost.
Yes, and so a 2011 study suggested that back then, every year that we delay take action and put more money into the system, we lose about $100 million of value. And so that number increases by about $100 million. And that was in 2011. So I would suggest that number is even higher now.
When we're spending road dollars, is it usually to gut and completely rebuild a road? Is it maintenance? Is it just kind of Band-Aid procedures? And what's that fiscal impact of doing whatever we're doing?
So the state does a really good job with their asset management. They formed the Transportation Asset Management Council back in the 90s, and we do a super good job of rating our roads. They're rated in very poor condition, but with that rating goes along an asset management system in which we fix what is right with the resources that we have at the time. And so at some point, there is some reconstruction that needs to be done, and the bonding program the governor has put out is pretty much all reconstruction, and all of those roads needed that. But once you get into the 15th, 20th year of a road's life, you can put some preventative maintenance on there to make sure that road will last another 15 or 20 years.
Yeah. Ed, for counties, how does the road funding work for you and your members?
Right now, it's a big struggle for us to try to figure out how to maintain the level or the amount of roads we have. Our roads are pretty much rated. Our federal aid roads are definitely rated. Our paved local roads or primary roads are almost all rated.
Yeah.
The things we can't control or we can't rate very well are the gravel roads, the dirt roads. Those are hard to really try to rate. But with the funding that we have available, we don't do a whole lot of reconstruction. We have so many miles of road that we spend more time doing road preservation type projects, mill and fill, crush and shape, 1-inch overlay or 2-inch overlay. Those are the sort of things that we try to do to maintain what we have.
Yep. And that's mostly driven by the resources. Would you rather be able to completely rebuild roads? I'm not sure, for our listeners to understand, does a road usually have, say, 15 years of life and you run it out for 15 years and the best bet is to completely rebuild it? Or is it more fiscally, does it make sense to every 6 years maybe scrape it, top it off, Band-Aid it a little bit?
If it's a major corridor, I think we have to start looking at reconstruction, full reconstruction. But right now, we don't have that kind of money, and we don't do a whole lot of reconstruction unless it's a federal aid eligible project or roadway.
Yeah, Mike, everything we're talking about is money, and it's pretty much with everything that comes through government. It is about the money. It's how you allocate your resources. A lot of proposals out there. We've heard from Lance talking about the dollars that are needed. What's on the table right now, and what's the starting point that we're working with legislators and the governor?
Yeah, so we're in an interesting juncture right now. I mean, I think most of our listeners likely know we're in a divided government era right now. And so you have a lot of, one thing to be clear, we've seen more action and more discussion on this problem than we've seen in many recent years, and which is good because, certainly from the Chamber's point of view, this is a top issue, a top barrier to economic growth, and we need a solution to it. The governor, kind of came out earlier in the year talking about it alongside Speaker Matt Hall, also, talking about this problem. We saw Speaker Matt Hall put out a proposal. Governor kind of shortly thereafter followed up with her kind of plan, although it was a little bit less in detail. We certainly had issues with some of the proposals that were part of the governor's plan in particular when you're talking about increasing the corporate income tax, although she didn't outright say she supported that. She kind of put it out there as one way you could look at, heavy truck fees, digital advertising taxes. These things are for us at the Chamber really, really difficult to get behind because, of course, for us, you need to look at, how do you provide systematic funding in an appropriate way. You got to look at broad and user-based fees, and so we just those types of proposals don't do that. They disproportionately impact one business sector over the other, and it's just not the right way to do it.
I think that's what really frustrates citizens too, is they look at it and say, how does that relate to road funding? And it's hard for them to make the connection. I think everybody knows we need to invest more, and it's one of the core functions of government. People are willing. They just want efficient government. I've been convinced for a long time, and people aren't against paying taxes. They're against wasteful spending, and they just want to make sure the dollars. And I have concerns with some of the tax proposals that were out there, say it was on an advertising tax or cannabis tax or different things. what you're going to get is less of that activity, which means you can't really look at a revenue stream as being stable because it's going to be declining.
Yeah, exactly. You're immediately creating disincentives. Right?
To your point, it seems to be user fee, broad-based, low rate, and get something stable so people can plan on it, because in the year of government, that pendulum is swinging back and forth. Governors of different parties or legislative control, that you're going to constantly, it's going to be hard to ever solve this problem if we don't have something consistent.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's what we've been talking to lawmakers about, is something consistent, something fair. I mean, and polling suggests that's what Michigan citizens are looking at as well. They might be willing to pay more, but they want to make sure that it's fair. And so we did see the House Republicans move on a bill package a couple weeks back, and really put forth a plan that would put more funding towards the roads. Now we did oppose the one bill that would increase the Michigan business tax massively, but I think the rest of the plan, is a real approach to solving this problem. Now it's really, again, we're in this interesting space right now where the House Republicans have moved on a plan. It's now sitting over in the Senate, and the Senate Democrats who are in power are generally saying, and this is maybe changing a little bit, but generally saying this is not maybe a priority, or this isn't a priority that needs to be solved with the way the House Republicans are trying to do it.
Yeah, but certainly we need to do something. And I'll come to you, and I'm not picking on you saying you've been in town longer than any of us, but you've been in town longer than any of us. I'm pretty close to you, though. But, I mean, what's always been the barrier? This is something that's gone on decades. It's not a Republican or Democrat issue. What really just prohibits us from ever getting a resolution that you've seen?
Well, I think, first of all, it's the amount, the deficit that we're in. And then we try to throw pennies at it, literally. When Governor Engler was here in '97, he did a 4-cent tax. And then when Snyder came in, he did a 7-cent tax. And both of them, after the signing ceremony, both said it's a good first step. There was never a second step. That was the problem. And I think even Engler may have been quoted as saying, had I done indexing in '97, maybe we wouldn't be in this big of a problem, bad of a situation. So I kind of look at that, and I like what Mike just talked about, where a divided government. We have a divided government, but we have a governor and a speaker who have 3 common themes.
Yeah.
$3 billion, local roads, and removing the sales tax on fuel.
Yeah, so what can we build from? It seems to be the best jumping off point. Lance, how does technology kind of enter into this? Not only building roads, but when I'm thinking about funding mechanisms, I'm thinking about electric vehicles and things like that. How do you make sure that, as Mike said, at least from our perspective in the Michigan Chamber, and I know a lot of people out there say, hey, it should be a user-based system, that you're really bringing everybody into the pool. How does that happen? Or
Sure. Yeah. And, that's been a question that a lot of states have had, and something that we really need to look at for the future. We're getting more fuel efficient vehicles out on the road. We're getting more percentage of our vehicle fleets being electrified and not taking any gas at all. And obviously those vehicles aren't paying what normal internal combustion engine vehicles are paying, and what normal user fees would be paid. In Michigan, we do have a higher registration fee and surtax for hybrids and electric owned vehicles, but it doesn't reach the full extent of what a gas paying vehicle would pay. And so there are a bunch of different ways to monitor how you can do a true user fee, but the best way out there right now is through a vehicle miles traveled tax, which would report the number of miles that you drive within the state and then charge you a certain cent per mile based off of that. That has run into a lot of problems in the Michigan legislature, a lot of fear of oversight, and a lot of fear of Big Brother kind of looking at where you're going.
Privacy issues kind of tracking.
Yep, absolutely.
Everybody understands they have an iPhone in their pocket.
Well, it's a very hollow argument at times. I would agree, but I think as you look into it further, there are a lot of different mechanisms on how you can collect those miles. Taking a simple photo and sending it into the Secretary of State is one way of doing that.
Yeah, definitely ways to get around it, but I think it is important. We kind of joke about it, or at least I did, but it is important to take into account what people are thinking, because we need the public buy-in for whatever we're going to do. Ed, you had a thought?
Yeah, Lance hit the electric vehicles and the hybrids, but there's one class of hybrid that's not paying any additional surcharge, and that would be the under-the-hood self-charging engines. There's no way to identify that type of vehicle with the VIN numbers that they're currently using. Secretary of State said that when we first tried to collect that surcharge, So, and that, if you're a northern state, that's probably the highest fleet in every northern state.
Kind of explain, what type of vehicle is it?
It's under the hood, self-charging. So it's charging itself. You don't have to plug it into the wall or plug it in at an energy station. So
gotcha.
that's what that is.
Yeah, we actually worked on that a little bit and made Secretary of State aware of this several years ago. And this is they admit they have no ability to do this. It's a massive problem because it gets right to the heart of what Lance was talking about, that we're seeing this erosion of the gas tax's ability to fund our roads. And there are solutions out there. So I kind of a head scratcher as to why we haven't figured that one out.
Yeah.
And the demographics that's most concerned about this is northern Michigan, where you look at all these rural guys. But they're the ones who have the big trucks, the heavy SUVs. They're the ones that are getting the less mileage rate right now. They're getting 18, maybe 19, 20. Everybody else is getting 30, 35, 45. That's who's paying. That's who's really filling in the gap for the transportation funding and the fuel side.
I know for several years I haven't been involved with it recently, but there's a lot of discussion about truck weights and axles. Where do we stand on that right now? Is there a consensus around what the impact is, or what's the best way to look at it?
No.
Now, from an engineering standpoint, the multiple axles is why we have heavier weights in the state of Michigan. And I'm going to use this phrase: we were grandfathered in by the federal government. I don't think they like that concept either. But at the end of the day, we were an auto manufacturing steel state that needed that additional weight, instead of running around getting permits from the Department of Transportation and every other local jurisdiction. This was the quickest, fastest way to make sure that we took care of the automobile industry. And we still do that. We still have gravel. We've got construction. We've got agriculture. Those are, as long as you got enough axles, you should be fine.
Okay. I know Mike made reference earlier, at least for the business community, the CIT was a big issue, corporate income tax. As you guys listed at proposals and you work in our different coalitions or work with policymakers, is there anything that you say, hey, that's just off the table for our organization? I know most of us are trying to keep an open mind and we want to be collaborative and see what can get done. But is there anything that you just say that just can't work for us?
Not for us. I mean, we were asked to provide the needs. Show me what the needs are on paper so that we can quantify what you're saying. And we provided that information to Lance, and Lance kind of compiled it all together for us, him and his other friends that were in the business. So we're content that we provided the need. It's theirs to provide the solution.
Yeah, we would agree. We're not really in a position to oppose really any plan at this point. We've traditionally supported user fees as a method of paying for it in your traditional transportation user fees, because those are constitutionally dedicated to go into the transportation budget. But we're facing such a road funding cliff at this point, and I've got members who are worried about having to lay off thousands of employees across the industry, and so we're willing to accept anything that is a good chunk of money that can get enough support out of both chambers and the governor's signature.
How worrisome is it from a talent standpoint as we look across industries and across sectors here in the state? Talent attraction and retention is important. If we aren't fixing this problem, and Lance, some of your members are losing employees, do we ever get them back, or do they just go to other states that's more stable?
No, we're very concerned about that. And if you look at what happened in 2008 when the state was in a recession, a lot of our companies expanded into other states where they were properly funding their roads. A lot of those employees went over there. We're talking about very skilled jobs that
Good
make a
paying
very
jobs.
good payment, that have retirement benefits attached, that have good health care benefits, vacation time, that they're going to take those skills to other states.
And I think that's where I come down and a lot of our members come down. Those are good paying jobs you want to keep here. And again, we know it's a lot of money and nobody wants to pay more taxes than they have to, but this is a core function of government, one we have to solve going forward. Mike, one area we haven't talked about yet is transportation. Part of fixing the roads is having the materials to do so. And I think all of us have been in conversations over several years about the aggregate industry. Can you kind of tell us what's going on that movement right now? Because that's we got to have the ingredients before you can bake the cake, and that's what we're doing when we're making roads.
Yeah, so frankly, I mean, alongside the road funding discussions and advocacy, the Chamber has been pushing for reform to how we site our aggregate mines, which, of course, having aggregates is critical to being able to build anything, whether it's roads or whether it's pylons for wind turbines or whether it's new construction, commercial construction. You need the aggregates to be able to do that, and proximity matters, right? And so the closer you are to being able to source that aggregate to where it's needed, the lower the cost is going to be. Right now in Michigan, because of local control regulations and barriers, frankly NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyardism. It is extremely difficult to site and permit for these aggregate mines, and so we have been calling for reforms for some time. Those conversations, are important because we believe we're paying as much as 20% more for sourcing our aggregates than we should be, and so. As we're having these road funding discussions, it's really important that we're also talking about the costs and associated with them, and getting the most out of taxpayer dollars, frankly. So we hope the legislature keeps that in mind as they're having these discussions, and we hope that we're looking at bringing up legislation to reform aggregate permitting soon.
Right. Lance, as we talk about that as well. I'm thinking about if we're paying 20% more, if we can fix that problem, isn't that something that should be interjected into the conversation where we're looking to fill that hole of however many billions of dollars? That takes a chunk of it, and not insignificant chunk, right off the top that we could save.
Yeah, it will certainly stretch the dollars that we have so we can do more lane miles, and that's absolutely right. One of the largest increases, construction costs have increased over the pandemic pretty significantly, and there's a variety of reasons for that. But one of our biggest increases has been trucking, just because of all the new regulations that are in place, the shortage in truckers, and so to our earlier conversation, putting more strain on that industry is going to be tough. But as we build projects throughout the state, we've got projects in Oakland County that are getting sand and gravel from St. John's, over 70 miles. That is increasing the cost significantly for those projects.
How much of this do we import maybe from Canada or somewhere? Because I'm thinking now about the tariff implications and how much more that's even going to increase the cost.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily import any sand and gravel. We do import limestone, which is very specific to some specified road building, and so it is significant. We don't know how big of an impact the tariffs will have, but they're definitely going to have an impact.
We do import salt too.
Oh, yeah. Kind of get everybody's gut check on this. What is your thought on a timeline for when we could see action here? Obviously, we have the budget coming up. Legislators also have their own issues they're dealing with. This isn't the only thing we're dealing with, but what's your optimism or pessimism for seeing some action?
I'm hoping the Senate Democrats can come up with something before the 4th of July, at least something on paper.
Mm-hmm. And then at least get some negotiation going back and forth.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We're hopeful that they can come to the table and respond to the House's plan. I think Mike alluded to it earlier, and I think he's right. They don't feel as though there's an urgency out there. We're trying to...
Have they driven on the roads?
Well, I digress. So we're hopeful that they do come up with some plans. We're having a lot of meetings with Senate Democrats right now, and that's a good timeline to have something on paper, really kind of to start the negotiations in July. But as we were talking earlier, it's probably going to be a budget negotiation. And I don't anticipate the budget being done before the October 1st deadline.
Yeah, a little bit of editorializing comment for me, but it absolutely is an imperative. It's something we need to have happen now. Really appreciate Speaker Hall and the governor putting out plans, things we don't agree with, but hey, they're on paper, they're out in public, and we can debate them. And I would just encourage Senate Democrats to do the same, because if we all work together, we're going to find a solution. We're coming towards the end of time. I want to go around the horn here. Mike, what's one takeaway you want to make sure listeners have as they think about roads as we're moving forward?
Yeah, I think everybody is aware that we're getting into pothole season here. So, I don't know that I need to tell people to be cognizant of that. I'm sure that they will be, whether they want to be or not. But, as you're riding on your own roads, think about, whether you want real solutions in Lansing to make your morning or afternoon commute better, and reach out to lawmakers and let them know we need real solutions. We need folks to come together, talk to one another, figure out what the solution can be. And of course, keep stakeholders like the ones we have here today at the table so that, we can get the best solution possible.
Lance?
Yeah, and if there are any listeners out there that do want to take the extra step and really reach out to their lawmakers, they can visit fixmistate.org and get more information. We've got a lot of information on there, education, and how you can reach out to lawmakers. I usually take these opportunities to remind people that there is a lot of construction going on around town. Mm-hmm. We've had a lot of fatalities over the years for people not paying attention and speeding through construction zones. So as we drive through those zones, I just encourage everyone to slow down, pay more attention, make sure that those families get back to their families.
Absolutely. Ed, you get the last word.
All right, thank you. I just we have a little inside joke at the office that we talk about, but it really rings true when you look at it from your personal standpoint, and that everything begins and ends in somebody's driveway.
Yep.
And they don't care if they're on a local street or a county road or a MDOT highway. They just want good pavement, and that should be our goal.
Yep. No, absolutely couldn't have said it better. And unfortunately, time goes by fast. We've come to the end of our time today. A very special thanks to Ed, Lance, and Mike for their work, not only on this critical issue, but on everything they do here working with our legislative leaders and the governor. Thank you to everyone for listening. Please get involved, make your voices heard. We're going to get real change when everybody makes sure their policymakers know what's important to them. Tune into our next episode. Subscribe or like our podcast for easy notifications. And until then, visit michamber.com for more information and updates on how not only roads issues is progressing, but any issue important to you and your family.